Thank you for joining me, babe. I appreciate you sitting with me and coming together to have this bedroom conversation because for people who saw the Sisterhood Takeover show on Thursday, if you didn't watch it, then I would like you to go back and watch it. It was a deep topic. You were the cameraman working in the background, and so you saw that we talked about why did I get married and why do I stay married, and I left the show feeling a little bit heavy. Mm-hmm. Remember, I woke up and I told you that because there was a viewer who posed a really, really good question. And I just felt like we had not really touched on everything that could have been touched on pertaining to that question. So, again, if you didn't see the Sisterhood Takeover show, please go back and watch it on our Sisterhood page. My name is Tracy. This is my husband, Eddie. And I'm just doing this second segue from the show because I just felt like we needed to discuss some things in deeper context. So the viewer said, why do I need to get married? Like in other words, what's the reason? What's the purpose? And Velma said, and she had a good point. Velma said, well, marriage is just a piece of paper, and to some extent, everybody can't understand the spiritual aspect of it because everybody's not there, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody's not there. Let's be real, right. Especially men, right? Some men are not. They're not walking that walk.
People in general, yeah.
People in general, okay. So I understood what Velma was saying in regards to, it's just a piece of paper. Why do I need a piece of paper? And again, go back and watch the show. Why do I need a piece of paper to say that I'm committed to this person? That, there's so many different things that you can do without the contract, that, you can do with the contract. And so I get it, and we kind of went into the legal benefits of being married and what that piece of paper, the benefits that piece of paper will give you, and they were all valid, but we didn't really touch on the fact that marriage is a covenant, and it's a matter of a covenant versus a contract. So from the side of being realistic, because I honored what Velma said about everybody's not there, I wanted to ask you and like just get your insight too. Like, okay, for those people, because we're married and we've experienced some things and we know about the covenant versus the contract. But for those people, let's just say they're not there. They're not believers. Do you think it's a valid point? Like our viewer said, well, what do I need to get married for? Like, do you think it's a matter of whether you're a believer or whether you're not a believer as to having that mentality? Do you think that's the case?
Honestly, yes. I think that's the case. A believer has a better understanding of the covenant than a non-believer. Mm-hmm. Covenant doesn't mean anything to a person if you don't believe. Mm-hmm. And I'm not just saying believe in God, but just to believe in anything. Mm-hmm. If you don't believe in marriage itself, then you really will not understand the whole concept of covenant. And it's real, how do you say, it's real interesting because we got married. Mm-hmm. But even when we got married, we didn't know how deep it was in the covenant. It took some things for us to go through and some classes that we took to understand what a covenant. We heard it that it's a covenant, but we really didn't know and understand that it wasn't just us dedicating our lives to each other. It was dedicating our lives to God, then to each other. And that was the thing about the covenant, that if you're not a believer, you will not understand.
So I'm thinking like, because we are believers, but I'm thinking like, when I think about people who, they may somewhat believe, but they're just not fully in. And so their mindset is, well, I'm not going to get married because I don't want to go through the cheating and this and that. And, like there's, like the viewer said, that she sees where a lot of married people, they end up getting divorces and things like that. So I get that. I really do. But then when I think about that, I think about like what's the real root cause? Like, is it, because when I was single, I didn't want to be committed, because if anything, went wrong, I wanted to bounce real quick. And some people think about that when it comes to marriage. Like, I don't want a piece of paper to tie me to this person, because if something goes wrong, or if something come up, or I just realize that I don't like you no more, I don't love you no more, I want to be able to leave quickly. And so when people say, well, what's the point in getting married, because blah, 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 I'm thinking, okay, but it's something deeper. Why don't you want to get married? Why wouldn't you want to get married?
It's real funny, because I guess the whole idea of marriage, it's drawn up as perfect and no problems. That's one of the misconceptions, or has how Pastor says it's a myth. One of the biggest myths is when you get married, things will be great and you'll be in love with the person. But no, it doesn't work that way. There's no way you can love a person forever. Okay? I mean, you can be in love. You can love a person forever, but it won't be all happy forever.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
What you mean? You're not gonna love me forever?
You can love a person forever, but you won't. You say it all the time. I don't like my husband at times. I mean, if you watch the show, she said it a couple of times. I don't like my husband. But it is something that just understand. Marriage is not, we all know this, marriage is not easy. And it's not for everybody, though. And when I say it's not for everybody, you have to be a strong-minded person. And sometimes the first one won't work out. Sometimes the second one won't work out. The third, people get married over and over to trying to make it work, But we both know sometimes the missing element is God. And that covenant, the marriage takes place in a church or in a building or wherever you get married. It's you and that person there. But understand that when you're getting married, it's you, God, and that person, or God and you two people. Okay? So, and that's the biggest thing about it. And if you really don't understand it, then yeah, you're not ready to get married.
So with that being said, when we talk about the covenant versus the contract, because we know, like, a covenant is permanent. A contract is temporary.
Yes.
So you can end a contract. A contract has an expiration date, but a covenant, that's a promise that you make. So what, in speaking to someone who asked that question, why should I get married? What do you think? Because I know we want to meet people where they are. We know that everybody doesn't have that type of mindset, or they may not be there spiritually. So what do you say to the person that asked that question? Why should I get married if they're not a believer? What would your answer be? Because I felt like I left that viewer hanging. We told her all of the legal benefits, but if she's a believer, then then we can definitely touch the spiritual benefits. But if she's not a believer, then, or if you're just not quite there yet, then what would you say?
I would treat it as if I was talking to my daughter or my son, and it was something that I would have to explain to them that you can be in a relationship and you can live together as if you're married, but your life will not be the same. You will not be fulfilled. You will not be happy. And understand that it will not turn out the way you think it would. Okay? So understand everything that you want to happen or everything that you're hiding from, it'll never happen, and you will be that more unfulfilled. You will be that more and I can use our marriage as an example. You know, because me and you, we've given our marriage to God. We're not just married. It's a relationship between me and you and God. Our lives have been that much better. You've been married before. I've been married before. And we can both honestly say it wasn't the same. But once we allow God, matter of fact, even the beginning of our marriage, we didn't give it to God. But once we gave it to God, our lives, our marriage, and everything, our family, it touched not just us. It touched everybody that's affected and connected to us. You know, people see us, they want to know how, what makes our marriage work. We don't make it work. God makes it work. We give it to God. So it's that type of thing that if I was talking to my daughter, I would say your marriage would be that much greater. Your relationships would be that much greater once you give it to God.
Well, how did you do that? How did you give it to God? Because you said in the beginning, yeah, and I would agree, and we can be transparent. In the beginning, you know, it was rough for us. You know, it was good, but we had some patches. You know, like overall, it's been great overall. But in the beginning, like year 1 through 3, we went through some rough patches that we almost didn't make it through.
Right.
So when you say we didn't give it to God until what, maybe year 3? Yeah. So when you say give it to God, what do you mean? Because I know that you did mention something. I remember in the class you mentioned something pertaining to, you know, the things that you don't like about me, and you know how if it was you, you know, in your flesh,
right,
you'd probably be like, but. So what does that mean when you say give it to God? Because somebody who really doesn't have a connection or really truly know or still feeling, you know, the spiritual aspect of relationship and marriage, because this is not just for marriage, this is also for dating and, you know, along the lines to get married, all of those things. So
okay, so there's some rules. Okay, there's some rules to this. So when I say I gave it to God, there's some things that I had to learn that I didn't know. Okay, and when I say I didn't know, I knew them in my head, but I didn't know that I was responsible for them. Okay, so let's start from the beginning. So when I say start from the beginning, the first rule is if you're going to get married, you know that it's a covenant, okay? But in that covenant comes sacrifice, okay? And it's sacrifice on both parts, but God has put the man in charge, okay? Now, when I say put the man in charge, I don't mean that he's in charge of the woman, but he's responsible for the marriage. He has more responsibility than anybody in this marriage, okay? So if there's something wrong, it's his job to get it right. If the wife's unhappy, it's his job to make her happy, okay? And if it's something that he's doing, he has to get it right. because God has placed him as head of the household. Okay? Not in charge, not the boss, just head of the household. In other words, everything that flows peacefully starts with him. Almost like a company. A company is only as good as its top leaders. If the leadership is bad, then the rest of the company is bad.
That's right.
Okay? So it works that way, and God designed it that way. Now, like I said, there's rules. Okay, so after that rule, understand that there's sacrifice. It's going to be a lot of sacrificing. In the class, we use the word dying. Okay? Nobody wants to die. Okay? But the whole ideal of it is you die to yourself so that your wife or your significant other can live. Okay? So there's many times honestly, that was the biggest lesson that I had to learn. All those things that I didn't like, it didn't matter what I didn't like, you know, because if my wife was unhappy, it was a lot more I wasn't gonna like. Okay, so
You better believe it.
it took a lot of dying. It really took a lot of dying, and in that dying, you learn that all you can do is talk to God. Like anytime I had a problem or anytime I saw something that I didn't like, I didn't have to fight her. I didn't have to, complain to her. I just talked to God about it. And God works in his time. Our time is definitely not his time, but it's amazing how his timing is always right on time. Okay? So it just happens to work out that way, and we still have problems, we still arguing, we still get mad at each other, but we've learned, how do you say, the rules of engagement. That's the one thing we've learned, because now she knows that if something happens with me, I'm not too much going to fight her on it. A lot of times I'm give it to God. But if it's something that God wants to change in me, he will use her to come at me. And I have to look at it and I'm like, God, okay, what's going on? God will point it out. He's like, okay, this is, and if I don't get it, she'll keep coming. So it just happens to work that way. God allows our spouse to make us better, or not even make us better, but allow us to have a better relationship with him.
That's good. So I guess really the thing with covenant versus contract is the key thing is, number one, would it be safe to say for people who feel like they don't need to get married, you can do whatever, from a non-believer perspective, and when I say non-believer, because you have some people that believe in God, but they're just not, that relationship is not quite like this. It might be all over the place, but they do believe. But what I'm saying is, like, having that total focus and commitment on God. So for someone who is in that stage, I guess it would be safe to say, if you ask the question, well, why should I get married? Then, it's like, my husband said, you're gonna come against challenges that is, if God is not in it, you're gonna constantly come against those same challenges, because God he's like the author of relationship, and he has to be involved in it. And so if you don't believe, then that's fine. I'm not judging anybody's perspective. But even if you're not a believer, understand from the legal perspective, there are, like, who wants to be with someone for 20 years and then, God forbid, something happens and you don't have that, like Velma said on the show, that piece of paper to say that you have this title of wife or husband, and so you're entitled to certain benefits. But from a spiritual perspective, it's a matter of, I made a promise to God. I didn't make a promise to him. I made a promise to God that I will, be with him for better or for worse, in sickness and in health. So when I get frustrated with him and I want to walk away, it's because of the covenant of God, that the promise that I made to God that I would stick by him, that I would stay with him for better or for worse. Now, I'm not saying, some things, there are grounds where you have to walk away, but God just wants you to give him a chance. Like, don't focus on him, focus on me, because like my husband said, like Eddie said, there's something most times that he's trying to change in you, not in your spouse. Like, he's trying to get that change out of you. And so when you say, like, I'll keep coming at you, it's like, okay, if God is trying to get him to change a certain characteristic, he'll use me to keep coming at him and pushing those buttons, because he don't want Eddie to look at me. He wants Eddie to look at him. And that's exactly what he does. He'll go to God and be like, okay, he'll start praying, or he won't respond or whatever. But then God is helping him to examine himself and like, okay, well, how could you have handled that differently? Should you have said that? Should you have done that? And there have been some times where I have exploded. And, when we finally came down to talk about it, and you'd be like, okay, well, yeah, I shouldn't have responded that way, because while I was exploding, you was talking to God. Mm-hmm. I'm still exploding because I'm like, you're not listening to me, but you really listening to me. You just like, if I react, then it's going to be even more explosive, because then it's your temper against my temper. And ladies, don't be fooled. Gentlemen, don't be fooled. The soft voice, don't let it fool you. That's a Leo right there. He has a large roar. So he won't respond in the same way that I'm giving it to him, because he's talking to God about it. But we weren't always there. Mm-hmm. And that's the difference between the covenant and the contract. Because if it was just about that piece of paper and the contract, I know you would have been gone, right?
You too? We've been racing to see who we beat each other there. No, you're not divorcing me, I'm divorcing you.
So that's good. And one last thing though, you did mention something, and I asked you, I said, well, if marriage is so great, and if like it's all about God and God is the key, then why is it that Christian marriages have a higher divorce rate than worldly marriages?
Okay. So the reason why it's like that is the same reason other people get divorced. Okay? The one thing that we all know, and we hear it all the time, that the devil hates marriage. Mm-hmm. And it's his job, more than anything, to destroy it. Mm-hmm. Okay? He's been doing it since the beginning of time. Mm-hmm. Okay? Because understand that even if you're not a godly person, or if you believe in God, the devil still hates your marriage, because God loves marriages. Okay, he ordained it. Okay, so it's his greatest creation for us. Okay, but like I said, since the beginning of time, he's been trying to separate us, because that marriage is that relationship between us and God, and that's what holds us together. And soon as God is out the picture, we fall apart. And that's exactly what happens in other marriages. When God is not in that picture, Christians can get married, but not every Christian know to put God in their marriage. Okay, because like when we got married, we've been Christians forever. But when we got married, all we knew is that we wanted to be together. We really didn't understand that we needed God, and that's why those first 3 years wasn't easy, But once we put it together, put God in the picture, and like I said, God still doesn't like it. He still comes at many ways he still tries to come at us, but he has a harder time now.
Oh, you mean the devil?
Yes, the devil. I'm sorry. The devil
Mm-hmm.
still tries to come at us,
Mhm.
and he has a harder time. So now he has to come with some new tactics,
Mhm.
because the old ones from back, them little, how do you say, premature kindergarten tactics he tried back then. We're older now,
Mhm.
and we've graduated from that part.
Mhm.
Understand the devil is still coming, and he's always coming. We know people who've been married 20 plus years, 15 plus years,
Mhm.
and the devil still comes at them.
Mhm.
He don't stop.
Mhm.
He won't stop,
Yeah.
you know, because that's his job.
Yeah.
But that's what I have to say.
Yeah, I think that's good. I think that was a very good point. Is that the reason why the divorce rate is higher in Christian marriages is because they're Christians, but they don't actually put God in their marriage. They don't actually focus on God, like, you know, like really, really focus on God, you know, and really just put Him at the forefront.
Right.
We're just Christians, but like you ain't not
Right.
right. So I think that's a really good point. Where, and then too, when you know, as long as you doing what the devil wants you to do, he ain't gonna bother you too much. It's when you start doing what you're supposed to do, that's where he really start coming at you. So that's one of the reasons too why I think, you know, divorce rates are highest amongst Christians. You know what I mean? Is because the Christians, you know, most times they're trying to. I think you said it earlier. You asked me. You. What did you ask me? You said something when you. What did you ask me?
I said, when you're trying to go to God for something, okay, how do you usually go about it? When you're trying to do something, right? And you're trying to do something for God, what happens? And the answer that you gave me is, you said, if I can't, you know, the first thing I try to do is do it by myself. Okay?
That's what it
when
was.
When you say I try to do it myself, you know, and it doesn't work right, then I go to God. I said, okay, even when you go to God, is it easy? And you was like, no.
Yeah, that's what it was. 'Cause I think you put it in the form of the marriage, though. You was like, when in our marriage, when you get upset, or when we first got married or something, you get upset. What do you do? And I was like, what you mean, what did I do? And he was like, what did you do? And I was like, well, it all depends. It depends. Like, it depended on, you know, if I was desperate and I needed immediate results, like I needed him to get it right immediately, then, you know, I would try and do it myself. But then, you know, being focused on God, if I was, you know, if I'm really, really trying to just say, okay, Lord, I'm not going to even focus on him, I'm going to come to you, then, you know, I would just try and stay focused on God. And then Eddie was like, but when you stayed focused on God, was it easy? And I was like, heck no, it wasn't easy, because like you said, God's timing is not our timing. So while I was waiting on God, I was becoming impatient, and, you know, just, you know, it's just not easy. And so I think that's another reason why Christian marriages sometimes don't work out, is because they're trying to go to God about a situation, but because we don't want to be patient and wait for that fix and wait on God to go take us through the process, we end up just bailing out and then feeling like, you know, God didn't, you know, maybe God didn't send this person,
Right.
you know. So, well, I appreciate the talk, babe. I hope that we covered the answer from a spiritual perspective on why should I get married. Do you think we hit it? Because I felt like I left the viewer hanging. So I wanted you all to hear from a male perspective as well. So it's not just females like it is on the Sisterhood Takeover, but it was a very, very interesting topic. So if you get a chance, I encourage you, go back and watch it. And you know, I'm always talking during the show, so I'm just going to end and say, like, if there was anything that you can give to the men about why they should stay married, what would you give them?
Why stay married? If I had to give you something, just always know that God made you the head, and he has responsibilities for you. You're responsible for your marriage.
Mm-hmm.
So if it fails, even if she leaves, it's your fault.
So there's some men that probably don't like you right now because they probably like, what you mean it's my fault even if she leaves? Okay. You don't want to clear that up a little bit?
No, it's nothing to clear up. It's nothing to clear up. It's not to clear up. What's to clear up?
Okay. There you have it. He said even if she leaves, it's the man's fault because it's your responsibility. So I guess I can understand that because if they're going to God.
Right.
Okay. Cool. Well, thank you all for watching. Thank you for taking the time out to help me close up that hole. And this has been a very interesting bedroom conversation. And we titled it, Why Do We Stay Married? And thank you. Bye.
Have a good one. Bye.
Thanks, babe.
Bye.